MMOs are famous for their rites of passage, challenges each player must face that takes them out of the fledgling newbie status and raises them to the tier of adventurer. In this video, I'm taking a trip down memory lane to discuss Final Fantasy XI's most memorable, The Road to Juno, and why it was so important to the experience. So hey guys, it's Hunt4Games, bringing you a healthy mix of videos on new releases in MMOs, and nostalgia trips for the classics that made us fall in love with games in the first place. And every player of Final Fantasy XI that survived their first month of play remembers their walk to Juno, that first journey from the safety of their home city through the various higher level zones leading to Final Fantasy XI's first major hub. But to understand why this was such a big deal, we need a little bit of background. Final Fantasy XI was a big game, like super big, very huge. If each zone lined up in a straight line, it would take significant time to walk your character from end to end. And keep in mind, in the footage we're viewing now, character movement speed has been increased by like 50% from what it was at launch. Characters were slow. Now the game wasn't set up like this mythical straight line that I'm talking about, but each starting city to Juno was still 4 full zones from gate to gate. And even if you started from Selbina, which is likely, I mean you're probably leveling in the dunes at the point, you still only saved like half a zone at most. Furthermore, at least half of these zones were filled with enemies impossible for a level 20 or below character to solo, meaning if you got aggro during your trek, it was likely over and you'd have to restart. Even if you only aggroed one, you'd never make it to a zone alive. But why walk? Final Fantasy is famous for its chocobos, and in 11 they were even more important, preventing any kind of aggro from enemies while you were riding one. Well, at level 20 you couldn't. The glorious quest to earn your chocobo license starts in Juno, and in fact, it was one of the big things that encouraged players to travel there. Having access to chocobos changed your ability to traverse Vana'diel, and if you could avoid it, you'd never walk again. So it was fairly exciting for new players, likely tired of walking everywhere, to picture the raw speed and safety a chocobo would soon provide. And if you weren't tired of it by now, you certainly would be after finishing this trek, eyes flitting left and right off the path for any wandering enemies that might cut your trip short. Low-level players explored at their own risk, without money for silent oils or invis potion, and most players not having access to sneak or invis yet, you couldn't really let your guard down while wandering through the wilds. And like I was saying, the walk was long. You had the starter zones leading into Kronstadt or Lothane or Tarangi, then after that was Meridod Mountains or Jugner Forest or Pashal Marshlands, before the final stretch was Saruman, Battaglia Downs, or Rolandberry Field. These are big dangerous zones with lots of wandering sight and sound aggroing enemies. I personally started with Selbina and took the Jugner route. It was terrifying, with high walls on the side of the path sometimes and tigers sprinting all over the place the whole way. Every second you thought something was going to cross the path and kill you, ruining the last hour or so of your effort. So at this point in the thought process, players are starting to say, maybe it's not worth it. I'll get there eventually, chocobos sound awesome, but it's just too much work right now. I'll just keep leveling until I'm strong enough to really handle the zones leading to Juno. Except you couldn't. The most popular zones for the early 20s were in Qufim Island, literally sequestered as this unique zone only accessible through Juno. Everyone tired of the waning XP in the dunes would inevitably make their way to Qufim for the next 5 or so levels. With how massive Final Fantasy XI was, I'm sure there were other camps somewhere out there in the wilds for the early 20s, but Qufim was so popular and convenient that convincing someone to go there would be a tough proposition. And besides, you're a brand new player. You don't know these deep secret camps in the wilderness. You just keep hearing from party members that Qufim is where it's at. Plus, at this point, there really starts to be a more significant gap between vendor-bought and auction house equipment. And I bring this up because items like the Spike Necklace, the level 14 stat ring, Bone Set +1 if you could afford it, all started to appear as options depending on your level. While there were auction houses in each major city, at launch they weren't connected to each other. They had distinct inventories, and Juno's always the most popular and the most filled. While you could make do, by around level 20 you were probably itching to get access to some of that better stuff that just never seemed to go up for sale in Winter's Past Dr. Sandori. Just one more push to get out to the real city of Juno. But honestly, besides all these reasons that Final Fantasy XI itself reinforced the importance of Juno, there was some larger drive for most players. Everyone had heard of Juno. It was the core of Final Fantasy XI for many years. Some would say it still is. You wanted to be there. Out in this distance, there was this city most players returned to after a long day of adventuring. You needed to get there. While you may not realize it beforehand, Final Fantasy XI wasn't a game about getting to the level cap and calling it a day. It was a constant growing journey where every day you explore further, reach new heights. Because of that, the game could be just as fun at level 25 as it could at 75, but you still felt different as a player until you got to Juno. This is where everybody hung out, from newbies to veterans. You'd see full-scale male players right next to like Sky Gear. You just felt the change. You were part of a larger community, and it was a beautiful thing. While you were still calling maybe Windurst or Bastok, Sandoria, or even Selbina or Maura your home, it felt like you were still kind of on the outside looking in. But once you were in Juneau and you've kind of made it your own place, that was it. And I mean that in the best possible way, because that was one of the biggest things for me about Final Fantasy XI. Once I felt like I was part of the community and playing the game, I never felt like I wasn't a real player because I wasn't at level cap. I enjoyed the whole ride and it was great the whole time. But we've gotten a little away from the actual walk to Juneau. Let me know what your experience was with your first walk. Did you avoid it for a while, or did you tackle it right at 20 to get that Chocobo license? Was this a formative part of any Final Fantasy XI player's experience, or a needless roadblock that drove players away? I personally think it was a fantastic and memorable part of play, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, in case you don't feel like chatting about Juneau and the yellow brick road to its front gate, question of the day: what is your favorite rite of passage from a video game? I think I'm going to include one of these at the end of each video every week, because it's just kind of fun. Otherwise, check out the Final Fantasy XI playlist for more 11 videos, and check back for more each week. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in more videos like this, think about subscribing. And if you already have, don't forget to click that little bell next to the sub button to get notified when new videos go live. Hit me up in the comments with your thoughts on this video, or come hang out and chat with me on Twitch every Tuesday night at 8 PM Eastern Standard Time. And definitely look me up on Twitter or Instagram and Hunt for Games to keep up with what else I've got going on. See ya.